How is everyone? Excellent. It's good to be with you again. So a number of people have noticed it's kind of like, it's been a long time. It's kind of like it has. I was last here in June. And but I'm going to be working with the new prayer chaplain class, so you may see me a little bit more. You may be sick of me by the time it's all over. But I do want to thank you because I actually get to know myself as a minister when I'm with you. I mean, titles notwithstanding, the work that is done and the connection is one of community. And so without that, then your identity, if you will, kind of disappears. So I'm always grateful to be here in this loving community and for the times that we've shared together. The title, as many of you know, I haven't really changed them in now 5 years that I've been coming here, which is something having to do with the myth of whatever your theme of the month is. And therefore, the title of this talk is The Myth of Enthusiasm, but the subtext is really, what do you see? Because I think that when I think about enthusiasm, initially it's always these thoughts of, happy times and great joy and lots of energy and kind of either skipping through a field or running through Macy's, whatever enthusiasm looks like to you. No judgment. But the actual meaning of the word has us, I think, reflect much more closely on our spiritual life than what we might call our secular life. And it's a combination of these two thoughts that actually have us then, there's a greater opportunity for looking at how enthusiasm works in our lives. So many of you know, I am greatly impacted by the Gospel according to Merriam-Webster. The dictionary is actually, and the thesaurus are primary tools, I believe, in terms of understanding what words actually mean rather than our feelings about them. And so when we look at the definition of enthusiasm, the first thing to notice is that it's a noun. And we generally tend to interact with enthusiasm from the doing part or the feeling part. And so there's just something to notice that enthusiasm is actually an idea as much as it is a thing. It really is an idea that gives life or brings life into our lives. The first definition is strong excitement or feeling, which kind of makes sense. And that's the general way in which we interact with the idea. The next one is something inspiring zeal or fervor. His enthusiasms include sailing and fishing. So that you can actually have an enthusiasm, not just be enthusiastic. You can actually have multiple enthusiasms about a variety of things, but I don't know that we necessarily think about it that way. Here's the one that I like the most. Belief in special revelations of the Holy Spirit. Belief in special revelations of the Holy Spirit. And it's very specific about which tradition this is coming from and all of that. And it's interesting that I don't know that we've ever really thought about enthusiasm having a spiritual foundation. That there's an aspect of it that actually speaks directly to our spiritual life that impacts our daily life. The last definition is religious fanaticism. And it was interesting. It was a surprise in a way because I haven't looked at this definition since the last time I talked about enthusiasm, which was a year ago at some point. And while this enthusiasm is this strong excitement feeling, it's an idea, believing though that the Holy Spirit or the divine or however you want to language that experience is actually speaking to you, is actually revealing things to you. Whether it's in the, per se, the way that it was originally showing up in maybe that original tradition, but who's to say? And is that happening? Because if it is, that's something that you want to pay attention to, because are those revelations actually providing you with that strong excitement? Or are the revelations have you trembling in the corner? Kind of which way is it going? And then fanaticism, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but it's worth noting that when you look at the definition of fanaticism, it speaks to excessive and or extreme enthusiasm for an interest or activity, but it can also have elements of intense, uncritical devotion. Intense, uncritical devotion. So you find yourself intensely devoted to something with no critical aspect to it. And when people bring up things for consideration, you dismiss it out of hand. So that's a little bit about the fanatical part. We're not going to focus on that today. I want to focus on this idea or this belief in the spiritual revelations of the Spirit, because, and I'd ask you to consider two things as I go through this talk. The first one is just fundamentally, what do you believe? What do you believe? Because this takes us back to what we fundamentally believe about our relationship to the divine. And the second thing that I'd ask for you to think about is, what have you been shown? What's been revealed to you, uniquely to you, whether you have agreement about it or not, whether you shared it with anyone or not. What have you been shown? Because these are the things that we must be responsible for, what we believe and what we've been shown. So this first myth that I'd like to talk about is that enthusiasm is only about how we feel. And I almost, when I hear that word, my first thought is to compare that moment, those times when I remember myself being enthusiastic, to the current moment that I'm in. The current moment that I'm in usually loses. The current moment that I'm in is usually kind of like just regular old life, without a lot of, over happiness or strong emotion. It's just kind of like getting up, taking a shower, getting dressed, going to work, doing work, leaving work, getting on the subway, going home, way too late, eating too much food, way too late, watching the television watching me, and going to bed. Not a whole lot of strong excitement. Maybe there's a piece of cake, who knows? But I feel like my experience, and I'm betting that the experience for some of you, is that when you think about enthusiasm or being enthusiastic, that it's sometimes like chasing the feeling of being enthusiastic without actually stopping to think about the depth of the experience that you want to have. So you kind of want to just be excited and feel good, but not necessarily for any particular cause or reason. Like it almost doesn't care. And it's like when you're at dinner and the wait person comes and says, "Would you like dessert?" And what you really want to say is, "Could you bring me a bowl of frosting?" Like keep the cake. Just bring me a bowl of frosting. But you never say that you want a bowl of frosting. Or when they come and ask for the appetizer, what would you like as an appetizer? I'll have tiramisu. Let's start this off in a good way. We kind of think, and I'm not quite sure where we've designed this, because I think that we actually, one of the things I'm going to suggest is we have to stop talking about somebody out there doing something to us. The things that we find ourselves dealing with are actually the result of many of our own actions or inactions, which are actions. And so we think somehow we've created this dynamic where we've got to be happy all the time. And if we're not happy all the time, something must be wrong. And in particular, something must be wrong with us. That there's something that if I could just fix that one part of myself, then I'd be happy all the time. Life would be fantastic and magnificent. The sun would shine every day, and small children would sing in harmony unceasingly. And it's certainly that experience that we're hoping to have has nothing to do with the Holy Spirit, has nothing to do with revelation. It has nothing to do with what have we been shown, what have we seen that could make a difference in our lives, a true difference, a profound difference in the way in which we live our lives and how we might be of service to others or the impact it could have on other people. That's not how we usually see it. It's usually just running to make ourselves happy. And we've kind of seen the result of that. That everybody's running, trying to be happy, and unhappy with the process of trying to be happy all the time. So, and when I think about it for myself, really thinking about that strong excitement and that strong feeling, many of those times were times that had to do with being with the Holy Spirit. They are times connected to something that I was engaged in or something that I was shown that was beyond human speech. And a contentment fell upon me that I could not actually explain. So I'd want to turn, if you will, to this other idea, this second myth that may be blocking us from this idea and this experience of being revealed to by a power or spirit greater than ourselves, is that I'm not very religious, so I don't have revelations. I don't quite understand that. That's an idea that's kind of located in a particular tradition. That's not really me. I'm not a religious person, so it's highly unlikely that I'm going to have revelations. And I'm not quite sure what you mean by the Holy Spirit. You might need to unpack that for me. I want to say that spiritual injury is a very real phenomenon. It is a very real thing. It's not limited to any particular religious experience, but we see certainly across a variety of religious traditions that people have been hurt tremendously. Often when they were young, but not always. Women have been treated horrendously by a variety of traditions. Not treating women with respect, not providing places like this for women to be and to express themselves and connect with the divine. So spiritual injury is fine, we understand that. This is, though, important when we're thinking about what is our relationship to the divine. What's our relationship to the divine? And how much of it might be impacted or blocked by some injury we may have experienced in the past. So when I was young, the church that I went to was a Presbyterian church in Harlem, all black, not a white person to be seen. No, seriously, I mean, this was kind of the neighborhood and the time that I grew up in, is that it's a small Presbyterian church, an okay choir. Like, okay, because for those of you who come from a Presbyterian background, there's not a lot of material to work with. And no offense to the Presbyterians, but there's not a lot of ham and organ and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty, kind of pretty regular. And I enjoyed church when I was a kid. It was a fun time mostly. But by the time I got to be about 10 or 11, some of the other kids in the congregation actually started calling me names. And then they started calling my sister names because she was a little overweight. So they started calling her Tubby and referring to me as faggot and all this kind of stuff. So I never stopped wanting to go to church because I didn't like God or because I had some problem with Presbyterianism, the choir notwithstanding. I actually didn't want to be with those kids anymore. Why would anybody want to show up every week to be tortured by people who are supposed to love you? And because of a number of other circumstances that happened to be going on in the church, we actually stopped going. My mother stopped being interested in going, and she had no idea what we were going through because we didn't tell her, because that's what children do. They keep things to themselves and bear it until you actually realize something's going on with them. And so, and then we were unchurched for a few years. Like, didn't go to church on Sunday anymore, and we would go when my grandparents would ask us for something special. You know, we would show up for a special occasion, but that was it. And so we were unchurched, and it wasn't until I started going to college that I actually joined the gospel choir at Duke University. Now that was a choir. And it was at that time that I actually began to have experiences with what I now call the Holy Spirit that I had never had before. And it didn't have to do with a tradition that I was aligning myself with. It didn't have to do with what fundamental beliefs were, but it had to do with a great enthusiasm for singing praises unto this God. And after that, I would start to have little moments of thinking about things that didn't seem to be on my mind. It didn't have to do with the next test that I had to take. It didn't have to do with jobs I wanted to apply for. But I would just start seeing insights and thinking about things and having opinions about things that I'd never experienced. And what I now know that to be were revelations. Were this being connected to this source, this power, this divinity, greater than myself, was actually now speaking to me and showing me things. And I didn't really have the capacity at that time to really understand, one, what was going on, but actually to move on it, to actually do what was being directed, say what was being expressed to me. And so it just often was just very interesting. But what I would ask you today is God speaking to you? What's being revealed to you in your dreams? While you're in line at the supermarket, through the words and the language of your children, through the circumstances that you see on the television. What's speaking to you through all of that? Because that could be the source of great enthusiasm for you if you were actually to act on it, and greater enthusiasm for people who might be liberated by what you have to say. But as long as it remains that you've got this construction that revelation is not something that happens to you, the thing that is naturally occurring is not going to make its way into society. And I'm not talking about judgments about people. I'm not talking about consternations about people, but I am talking about what is being revealed to you. What is something that actually makes no sense based on the data that's presented to you, but you know it to be so. And I'll say this to you, because many of us are concerned with the events of the day. I have been convinced since the very beginning that this is a moment of transformation for the planet. I am convinced. And I have no evidence for that. Except that too many things that show up as coincidence rarely are. And every place where we have been irresponsible or short-sighted or hate-filled is presenting itself for examination and repair. It is seeking our surrender, our apology, and taking responsibility for what we have been completely irresponsible about. And I know none of this sounds enthusiastic. Because none of this is happy, oh, I feel good about my life. Like, none of this is that. But transformation is exciting. Because in most to all of the spiritual practices and traditions, there is some element, not of just change, but of transformation, where people, ideas, move from one being to the next, move from one way of thinking to a complete new way of thinking. That, for me, is the opportunity. And I'm excited about that. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to get what I want. It doesn't mean that. They are two different things. But there will be a transformation. And I will say as my third myth, and in closing, that enthusiasm, your enthusiasm, is for you. That's a myth. Your enthusiasm, in ways that you don't even know, liberates people around you every day. The choices that you make, seeming so effortlessly, is a level that people want to aspire to. The gifts that you have and that you explore are the things that people want to be. They want to have that freedom. But we don't interact with it like that. We don't interact with our enthusiasm as if it's a gift for us to be shared like all of the other gifts we've been given. And I encourage you, and I really can't say it strongly enough, not just your own liberation from this little existence that you are trying to hold on to, but the liberation of the people around you is rooted in the degree to which you can be enthusiastic and take action on what Spirit is telling you to do. I don't know if some of you saw The Color Purple, the movie, but there's that song towards the end of the movie where Sugar's in the garden and the church is happening, and you know her father is the pastor of the church, but she's been kind of shunned from the church because she's turned herself into a woman of the world, but never stopped being a church girl. And she starts singing with the person who's singing in the choir stand that God is trying to tell you something. And there are all these things that start happening in your life, all these coincidences, all these things that seem like coincidences, but it's really God is trying to tell you something about how to move, who to be, what to do, what actions to take, and how to be for others. So don't allow yourselves to be fooled, if you will, by the myth of enthusiasm. Lean into very closely, what do you see? What do you believe? And what is there for you to do? God bless you, and thank you so much.